Hello and welcome to Country Roads Confidential. I'm your host, Chris Anderson, publisher of earsports.com, the West Virginia site on the 24/7 Sports slash CBS Sports slash Paramount Podcast Network. It's a little different this morning. Mike is on a special assignment. VIP members know where he's at. He's in Indianapolis, at Hinkle Fieldhouse, interviewing one-on-one the next West Virginia University men's basketball coach, Ross Hodge, who is there with his North Texas team for the NIT Final Four. And in place of him, we're going to break it up. Instead of basketball coaching search stuff, spring practice stuff, we're going to talk with Brian Dohn, 24/7 Sports National Recruiting Analyst, about West Virginia's signing class, recruiting, transfers, all sorts of topics. Brian, thanks for joining us this morning.
Hey, I appreciate you having me first. And Chris, I think you need to add like a slash be sponsored by tutors. And then I apologize to everybody out there who this isn't like the B guy coming in. This is like the L guy coming in to replace Mike. So apologies to everybody there.
Nah, you're the A guy when it comes to recruiting talk. So that's why we
Well,
got you here. That's what we're switching up to. It I mean, we have to talk recruiting, right? Everything seems so different, so weird, so transitiony with the way recruiting is nowadays in the transfer portal, but there is still something to it, whether it's high school recruiting. Obviously, transfers is a big deal, but um, you and I have talked a lot off the podcast about West Virginia's stance and their approach with recruiting. Where do you want to start today for the podcast? 2025, 2026 transfers. What do you think?
I think for me, I just want to start with this, and it's something I'm working on for May, and I'm really interested to see what the numbers are. But it's my belief that, especially with revenue sharing becoming such a, it's going to be the main thing ahead of NIL, especially if this committee gets put forth where they have to approve NILs above a certain level, that high school recruiting is going to be very important again. And I'm going to take a look at it and kind of go in depth. But, when I look at Ohio State, which won the national title, yeah, they had to transfer a quarterback, but their roster, there were not a ton of transfers. I think the safety was a transfer who's probably the best safety in the country. But so when we talk about recruiting and everybody gets so excited about the portal, I think there's been a shift on what schools want from portal kid or who they're going to go. The Power Four to Power Four doesn't really work that much unless you're going from a mid-level Power Four team to a elite team, and that mid-level Power Four was really that player was really good. So I think wherever you want to go with it, Chris, is fine for me. But I think I'm really curious to see what happens when I do this story on how important high school recruiting is, because I still think that if you're going to be successful year in and year out, you better recruit high schools well. And you look at Florida State, and the big concern of them last year was, yeah, they went undefeated and they brought in a lot of transfers because they hit. And then they brought in a lot of transfers that they missed and were terrible last year. And it almost cost Mike Norvell his job. And so for me, when I'm looking at recruiting on a whole, I still think high school recruiting is important. And I get the sense that it may turn more important moving forward because you can get a kid on your team, develop them, and then pay him. Like if you're West Virginian, maybe you don't have the money of Georgia or Ole Miss or Tennessee. That if you develop them, you have a chance to keep him and lock him in for a couple of years if you sign him to a contract. So wherever you want to go, but that's kind of my early thoughts that I've never really shared with the West Virginia community.
Well, let's start there because there's two questions I have for you, two angles I want to
Yeah.
go here. First off, let's talk numbers. Well, I guess both questions in regards to numbers. Let's talk financial numbers first. A
Right.
lot of kind of the conversation, at least on our board, is hey, and I think I want to say I don't know if it was Neil Brown, but somebody on the previous coaching staff had mentioned, hey, some of these conversations about money are really more focused on transfers than they are high school recruits, especially with the level of high school recruits that West Virginia is recruiting. They're not getting the
Right.
five-star kids. Those five-star kids are probably getting big money, but not the three-star kids that West Virginia is recruiting. Um, what were if you've heard of anything, what would you say like those numbers are? Are there numbers? Are the dollar figures thrown out for high school kids? And do you think now that changes now that we're say, guess it's coming in-house for rev share angle here?
Yeah, I think, look, when you're talking about the top 50 players, I think it changed. I think the high school kids are getting a good amount of money, but Here's the example I'll give, and how complex it can be, and hopefully in the process I'll answer your question. So you look at Tennessee's quarterback situation, right? Where Nico has, I mean, depending on who you talk to, maybe he's making 2, maybe he's making 3 this year. Well, next year you bring in Faison Brandon, who's the #1 player in the country, who's committed to Tennessee, who's a quarterback. Well, if you're going to do roster management and you're going to have basically, let's say $20 million for your roster, can you really pay both of them? Right now, those kids are, between the two of them, you're going to be making. I mean, that's a big number when you're doing roster management, and it's a lot of money to play somebody who may not be playing. So there's that aspect of it. There's the aspect of because guys are from the transfer portal are proven commodities to a certain level, you kind of know what you should get. It's easier to pay them. And so in speaking to schools, yeah, they're going to pay them. Like if you have 17 to 18 million dollars in that you can spend on your roster for revenue share, right? And this is where the Big 12 and the ACC, there's a real concern with it, because the money the SEC and the Big 10 are getting just from their television dollars means that, the Rutgers, Purdue's, Illinois, they're all in the high teens in terms of how much how much they're going to be able to spend. Now, the West Virginias of the world and the Baylors and the Iowa States and that stuff, well, yeah, they can still spend that money, but instead of it being 75% of the rev share, maybe it's a 90% of the rev share. And so you don't have as much. And so when you're talking about over a 5-year span, there could be a $50 million gap between a Big 10 SEC school and a Big 12 ACC school. I mean, that's what the lawsuit was about with Clemson, Florida State, and the ACC, was they wanted more money because they're afraid of falling behind the Big 10 and the SEC. Now, what it also does is, so you look at Penn State, who is paying their quarterback 7 figures to return, Drew Aller. They have 2 running backs who are just really good players, and they're going to pay them a lot of money. Well, if you're talking about a salary cap, and again, it all depends on what happens with the House settlement with NIL. And is there a committee that says, okay, if you make X number in NIL, it has to be approved, and that way you can't spend $1 million on a high school left tackle because there's really no value there. It's not worth the value in what he would get in endorsements. So if you're a Maryland or, like I said, Purdue, Northwestern, where you have that money, well, now you're middle of the roster guy, you can pay a little bit more than maybe like a Michigan, Ohio State, Penn State would pay to a bottom of the roster guy, right? And so maybe it evens out a little bit in there. And in speaking with some schools, there is some discussion that high school kids are getting less. But it brings another point, Chris, with you see all these places hiring GMs, right? And I think what happens with the GM role, I think people don't understand exactly what that GM needs to be able to do. If you're Bill Belichick and Mike Lombardi, who have spent their careers in the NFL and understand salary structure, they can assign a value to each player on their roster, 1 through 105, right? So this is how much your backup quarterback should make. This is how much your third string left tackle should make. They have experience with that. I don't know what experience Rich Rod would have with that. And so if you bring in a GM, it has to be somebody who can negotiate the NIL deals to keep it separate from the coach. So when the coach tries to, so when they give a kid wants 200K, he gets 125. He doesn't hold it against the coach. He holds it against the GM. But that GM has to understand roster value. And in my world, at least, you would want him to have the experience of having dealt in a world where there was roster value for players.
I think it's going to be interesting in West Virginia. Their first general manager was Drew Fabianich, who came from the Dallas Cowboys, but he was a scout. He didn't deal with like you're mentioning here, salaries and figuring out budgets and stuff like that. And now Rich Rodriguez has gone a different direction. I mean, it's still a scout, but um, in Chuck Lilly, I was about to say Greg Lilly. That's not right. Chuck Lilly, who's the general manager who came from Oklahoma. Now he's had experience at, I would say, some big programs that you want to be associated with when it comes to
Right.
acquiring talent, like Clemson, Oklahoma. So he has experience in those, but like you said, not really the experience of the budgeting aspect of this, figuring out the salary, where you want to split. Because back to your Tennessee point, like, yeah, do you want to spend 5 out of that 20 million on quarterbacks
Right.
when only one of them's playing? Oh, that's tough because you got a lot of mouths to feed over there, and it's going to be. I don't know I mean, I'm assuming a lot of people feel that it's going to be a very interesting first couple of years of this rev share thing because all these schools keep talking about how they have a plan for it. Like, we know what we're doing. Here's the plan. Here's how it's going to be split up, not just between teams, but then also how they're going to do it on the roster. And Rich Rodriguez
Right.
has said, "Hey, we're going to do it like this, where our starting left tackle gets paid more than our, third string right guard." And I just
Right.
feel like there's still going to be questions of what about a guy who, say, is a co-starter? You know how coaches love the or on the depth chart, like they can't help themselves.
You mean like when there's a running back and there's 4 oars listed, and you're like,
Yeah,
man, there's more oars here than our crew team.
yeah. Are you gonna like pay all 4 of them like starters? Or are you paying all 4 of them like backups? What if one guy starts the first game and then another
Yeah.
guy's starting by game 4? It's
Chris,
gonna be
it depends how deep you really want to dive into this, because what this is all leading toward is there has to so at its heart, the issue is the presidents, right? The presidents do not want to make the players employees of the university. And once that happens, and it will happen, you can then have a collective bargain to where you get a high school kid and you sign him for 3 years with a buyout. And if there's no tampering and you're found to tamper, you are now breaking a legal document. It's not just, hey, tampered, the NCAA may or may not do something. Um, so for me, from that standpoint, it's got to get to there, and it's going to be a mess until you get there. And without, I mean, I've already gone on 6 tangents, so sorry about that. But let's be honest about this. I have now changed my stance on the NCAA. Instead of me thinking the NCAA has no power, which they don't, the NCAA says, you know what? Even when we try to enforce stuff, schools sue their conference, sue us, do this. So you know what? Screw you guys. Go do whatever you want. It's the wild, wild west. We're not going to dictate anything. Everybody's tampering, because if you're pissed at somebody's tampering, you know what? Then just turn them in and then make it public, because all this stuff is now done through DMs and all this stuff. Just make it public. But nobody will do it because they're all doing it. And none of the coaches trust each other. None of the programs trust each other. And all they try to do is cover up what they're doing outside of the rules that they should not be doing. So to me, until they are employees and you can get something collectively bargained, it will be a mess. The moment it's collectively bargained, then you'll have some more stability again.
all right.
Sorry.
No, you're good because hey, it's oddly enough a very, speaking of tangents, to a quick little offshoot of this is it is going public with West Virginia University wrestling and Iowa wrestling. West Virginia involved in um, competition recently, a match recently, and Iowa boosters openly talking with some of West Virginia's best wrestlers and trying to get them to transfer to Iowa. And the West Virginia University head coach and a director of operations for wrestling calling them out publicly on social media, being like, leave these players alone. Stop having your boosters call this kid's family. They don't need to know how your NIL works. So I wish we could see more of that, because you're right. Like, teams don't want to, typically, they don't want to do that because it's like, hey, yeah, I don't want to bring this up because if they look too closely, we're going to be in trouble
Right.
too. So, not
Right.
really something they want to bring up. Um,
And the other thing,
circling,
Chris, real quick on it, is now West Virginia is a public institution, right?
yeah,
So if you go, you can probably find everybody's salary
yeah.
on a website. Well, if the players are employees, those salaries have to be listed. Oh, that would be
That's
classic.
great content right there. Big fan here. Big fan. Content right there.
Oh, imagine that locker room after something happens and some dude's like, yo, man, I saw you're making this
Yeah.
and you can't throw the ball to me? Come
Yeah.
on. How's the guy better making half as much?
Oh yeah. It's
And
coming.
at least parents would handle it well too, because they always do.
Yeah, absolutely. They would absolutely not sit in the stands and have fights over it all the time when they're all crammed into the same section together. It'd be great. Um, all right, let's circle back to the recruiting because I said I wanted to ask you about two numbers. The first number was the financial number. The second number is the number, the personnel number. Where over the years that I've been doing this, I've been doing this for 15 years. You've been doing it longer than I have. The number that you should quote unquote be targeting for a recruiting class has kind of fluctuated. I mean, it used to be back in the good old days, you would see those Ole Miss and those guys sign 30 some kids, stick half of them in JUCO and figure it all out later. And it's gone down infamously at West Virginia during Bill Stewart's days. You say, hey, what's 5 times 18? That'll get you up there to, you know, get you to the right number. And it's like, no, I don't think that's a good idea. And then 2025 in that range. Where does this number go now for high school? Like with all the
Well,
transfers, all the availability, where does it go now?
so it depends what you're asking. Are we asking just in Power Four football? Are we talking,
Yeah, let's talk West
FBS
Virginia.
football?
Let's talk
What are we
West
talking
Virginia.
here?
Power 4 West Virginia-ish range on the totem pole.
Okay, so first of all, I know Rich Rod has been talking about how much he hates that he has to cut kids and all that stuff. Two things about that. You brought in 31 transfers. Okay, so what did you expect? And then you signed what? 25, 30 high school kids. Um, so you can get to 105. Let's make sure everyone understands that. Your max, what they think, as long as this house settlement gets through later this spring, I think it's next month, you can get to 105. That's your max. Now there will be schools that go to 90 because those other 15 slots that you would have to pay at least something, you can pay to other kids on your roster. So there's that roster management. So high school in a world, I still think everybody's going to sign about 20, right? You're looking to sign about 20, which gives you over a 5-year period 120, and then you have attrition that's going to happen there. It's what I said earlier. I think the importance of going back into the high school recruiting, I think, is going to be important because now with the rev share, it's going to allow schools to lock up their players maybe before the portal would open, and hopefully you'll have multi-year deals to where you can lock them in. And again, there'll be buyouts if you want to cut a kid, if he wants to stay. But I still think it's that, because if you're bringing in 20 transfers a year, 15 transfers a year, you're in trouble. That means your high school recruiting was horrible, your evaluation wasn't any good, and you didn't develop them. I know Rich Rudd was talking about how he hates to have to cut kids. Well, okay, well, I understand that. It sucks, but if you want to be paid as a player, this is life. I mean, if you're going to work at the fast food place down the street and you're supposed to be the fry guy or making burgers or whatever, and you don't do your job, you get fired. Well, this is no different. If you're in the bottom 20% of job performance on your roster, well, they're just going to find somebody else. That's where we're at. This is now, we can call it college, whatever. It's pros and they're getting paid. And so the roster cut, I mean, does it suck? Without question. Especially since these kids are 18, 19, 20 years old. Some of them need to develop. You're going to be talking with these kids and their families when they come on campus. Oh, we're going to take care of you for 4 years. This is going to be it. This is the place to be. And in 2 years, you're going to be gone. And be, wait, what happened? Well, that's the price of doing business when this is the model you want. And let's be clear, the players pushed for this, and rightfully so, but this is what the players pushed for. And so for me, I still think you're like, if Rich Rod's bringing in 20 transfers in 2 years, something has gone colossally wrong there. And you look across there's very few programs who have figured out the transfer thing year after year. I think Ole Miss does a good job with it. But on the whole, man, if you're bringing in a lot of transfers, you're in trouble. So I do think you're still going to have the 20 to 25 high school kids because A, they're going to be cheaper, which means you can pay the rest of your roster more. And B, you have a chance to develop them and have them for that breakout season on a much lower cost.
And to your point here, I think let's be honest about this. Like, say there's 1,000 transfers, 950 or 970 of them are flawed in some. They're in the portal for a reason. They're either not playing. They're either coming from a smaller school and coming to play up, and they were at a smaller school usually for a reason. Not always overlooked. These guys, they're too small, slightly slower, whatever it might be, or they were a backup at another school. They couldn't crack the two deep at another school. So what makes you think more often than not that they're going to just come in and start at your school?
Right.
So
So
you're right.
I look at like West Virginia bringing in 31. If 10 of them play a significant role, that's good, right? It's good. And because you're talking about, like you said, if you're coming up a level, okay, great, you're moving up a level, but now can you play at that speed? Like if you're a MAC player who's coming in and playing, or if you're an FCS player, can you play at that speed? And then the other thing is if you have 1 year of eligibility left, even if you're a MAC player or maybe you're at another Power Four school, and I say this all the time, if you're that good, you would have been at the NFL Combine. So, or you would have been like, okay, let's try the NFL. So I think with Rich Rod, I think with the amount of transfers he brought in, he looked at the roster and was not happy and was like, oh my goodness. And he's going to look at, he's looking at the roster in the spring and he's like, man, we are really behind on this thing.
Hold on, Brian. Let me step in here for Rich here. He, he's been giving a lot of press conferences and he's had a lot of comments about it being soft and not hard edge is his term and this and that. And so there were some stories written that he was not happy with the roster. He started off his press conference the other day, said, I'm happy. That's not accurate. I'm happy with the roster, just not the depth, which tells me he's not happy
I
with
would
the
love
roster.
to hear you and Mike explain that one.
Yeah. So just to be clear, he loves the roster, not the depth. So
he loves the roster because he can cut a bunch of kids after the spring and bring more in. Is that why he loves the roster? Like, isn't he the one who said you need like 6 DBs?
Yep. Oh yeah. After they already added 5 senior transfers. So
look, and I get it. He's got to say that for a lot of reasons, and I don't begrudge him with that. And
no,
it's the
absolutely.
old
Yeah.
rule
Say
of
we're laughing
recruiting.
and having a good time here. He's not wrong about anything what he's saying here. So yeah.
No, listen. I mean, they didn't fire the coach because the program was in great shape.
Right.
Right. Like I talk to coaches all the time, and whether it's the high school level, college, or whatever, and they'll talk about how it's a struggle right now, or we need to rebuild this. And my response is always the same. Well, if it was any good, you wouldn't be here.
Yeah.
If West Virginia's roster was so good, Rich Rod wouldn't be, Neil Brown would still be there. And I'd be calling you asking, hey, is that the one that got him an extension again?
All right, let's talk about the high school enrollees. 12 of them enrolled early from this most recent class, the 2025 class. Rich Rodriguez, in his most recent press conference, said he will not name names out of those 12 of who might be doing well. He insinuated that a couple of them are doing well and would be involved in the two deep. He insinuated that a few of them are not, and we'll see if they're still around later. And then obviously some in the middle that just need to develop. So you're coming in blind here. I am too, because he, again, won't name names, and we have gotten a grand total of 8 minutes to watch spring practice this spring. So we're kind of both going in blind here. But who out of the 12, and you've seen the enrollee list, do you remember or stood out to you from your evaluations in high school?
I was able to see a fair, a decent number, not all, not half. But I will say this, Chris, before when you say won't name names, I just have this Seinfeld flashback to the Chinese restaurant. And anyway, some people will understand and some will turn it off right now. But anyway, like the kid, I think I texted you during it, and the kid I'm really excited to see how he develops is Zah Jackson out of Huntington, West Virginia. I went and watched him play, spent some time at this school, and I remember watching. I'm like, yo, if this kid was playing in like DC or even Pittsburgh, man, he would have had 30 plus offers. Like he was electric, dynamic, good size, accelerate, speed, played hard on both sides of the ball, just looked like he's everything you want in a player. So I'm really excited about seeing how he develops. And I mean, if you need 6 new guys in the secondary, if this kid isn't going to be one of your top 8, 9 players, then your secondary is going to be unbelievable because he's athletic, he can move. So I do like him. Um, you know, another kid that and this was you and I had spoken at signing day when Julian Horton was going to sign with West Virginia, and you're like, do you worry that they don't have a coach? And he's like, nah, I like this, and this. And like, to me, he's the kid that West Virginia used to get out of the Maryland DMV area. He's a safety. He's long. He's athletic. He runs well. He was going to go to North Carolina and kind of shifted things to West Virginia. And I do not think he's in early. I can't remember, but I think he's a kid again in the secondary who has the athleticism, length, speed to, if he can pick it up quickly, still get on the field as a freshman, especially when you realize you can play 4 games and still redshirt. Guys like that. I think some of the guys on the line of scrimmage, like Kevin Crawford or Wonderson Telemaki or Ramondo Johnson, I saw all of them live, and I think those are guys that will have to, like any lineman, kind of develop and take some time. But I think they were further away from getting on the field. Maybe a second, maybe a third year type player. If there's some, as Rich Rod says, he loves the roster, and there is, just needs some depth. These are guys that, maybe are depth guys after a year or 2 in the program. But yeah, the guy, I'm really excited to watch Zah Jackson, to be honest.
All right, we'll finish things up by looking forward now. 2026. The other piece of homework I gave you was to ask you to look at the official visitor list that we got
And
over on
I
our
was
website.
never good at, I mean, listen, school, especially, I did better in college, but high school was not my strong suit. So that you gave me homework and actually thought I would entertain doing it is admirable by you. But go ahead.
But the visitor list, hey, take a look at it, and what caught your eye? Like, it was just like, what, anything. I left it wide open. I didn't say let's
Right.
talk about this, that. Kind of left it open to you, and there were a couple things that you mentioned to me before we got started here that you wanted to talk about. So I'll open the floor to you here. What caught your eye about West Virginia's official visitor list?
Well, I find it interesting that Ashton Blatt from Pittsburgh is coming up weekend on an official visit. In looking, I'm working on something that's going to come out this week on April official visits. And unless you're Oklahoma State or Arizona State, your hit rate is really bad on getting commitments from April official visitors. I think it's something
Oh,
like 7 of 44 last year outside of Oklahoma State and Arizona State. Wound up signing with the school they officially visited in April. Now, this is a little different. It's sped up. I know Ashton Blatt has, Wisconsin official later on, Duke official later on, and this may be West Virginia's way of saying, like, listen, we're going to make a big pitch to this kid, see if we can get it done and shut down his recruitment. He has one, I think, set to Penn State. Pittsburgh's involved too, but I think I'm watching that. When I saw that, I was like, oh, that's a curious official visit. And then the other one is just the quarterback situation. Peyton Falzone, the top 247 kid out of Nazareth, PA, he has official set to Utah and Iowa. He was at Penn State Thursday. He'll be at Ohio State on an unofficial on April 12th, but he told me he was close to locking in a West Virginia official visit. And Chris, I find that interesting because even though he's like 6'4", He's a kid that runs he just ran a sub 11-second 100 meters. He's athletic. He is a guy that can, at this point, he can throw the ball. He has a strong arm, but he can really kill you in the run game if a play breaks down. And I go back. I mean, listen, I watched West Virginia for a long time. I've been to games there. I mean, I go back to the Major Harris days and that stuff. And I think of Rich Rod when he had Pat White, and I see something like that. And so foul zone, and I'm saying foul zone's Pat White. So please, before we go crazy,
Oh,
let's
already
not.
clipped it. Already clipped it. So
Okay,
social
good,
clip.
good. So him, he told me he's close to setting an official visit there. So I think that's important. And then they just had the quarterback Hewley on campus, and we'll see where it goes with him. I think he's slated to visit June 13th, which in the and each team is different. Let's start off with that. Each school is different, but the sweet spot for most official visits are May 30th through June 1st, or the June 6th through June 8th weekend. By the time you get to the 13th, a lot of those kids will be committed elsewhere, or else you'll have gotten commits at those positions and those officials won't happen. Now, there's outliers. Virginia Tech this year and Miami, their big weekend is June 20th through the 22nd. I think that's risky for Virginia Tech. But so when we're writing about official visits, order matters. When West Virginia is getting their marquee guys on campus and their commits matters. Now, they only have 2 commits right now, so you can't really even chart where most of their commits are going to visit. But those are the things, Chris, that really stood out to me. And listen, everybody loves quarterback recruiting. They love talking about it. They love reading about it. I think it's interesting because roughly half of the starters at the Power 4 level at the quarterback position are transfers.
Yep.
But there's also some really good ones that wind up staying. And I think, again, in this new climate, you have a better chance of keeping your quarterback. And if look at West Virginia going to Big 12, Rich Rod's offense, man, I want to be there as a quarterback. As long as the talent pool's around you, you'll make your money somehow. Just get there and throw the ball around the field.
I'm interested to see what they do with this. Obviously, this is the first summer or the first set of official visits for Rich Rodriguez back at West Virginia. Because, under Neil Brown, it was, hey, get all the guys in that first weekend. Like you said, the May 31st this year. Right now, 0 official visits as far as I know for that weekend. About 15 of them for June 6th, and then another 10 for June 13th. And to your point, I think, previously, like if you had to be guess, I would say at least 5 of those 10 that are set for June 13th will have committed somewhere else before we ever get to that weekend and won't show up. So just know that, you recruit nicks out there. That's just how it works. So I'm with you. Like the earlier the better usually, but we'll see. Because and plus quarterback recruiting, I mean, half the time you should probably have a quarterback in April or March, like before you ever get somewhere.
I'll tell you something really interesting. I'm going to write something on Foul Zone probably Tuesday, maybe Wednesday, depending how my schedule clears. But I spent about a half hour on the phone with him the other day, and it's interesting, right? He was at Penn State Thursday. He was supposed to be at Rutgers Saturday, did not make it because his dad got sick and didn't want to go infect the whole team. So he's going to reschedule that. But okay, so this coming up weekend, he's going to Iowa unofficial. April 12th, he'll be at Ohio State. Then you have the following week, the 19th, he's got an official to Iowa. Okay, so that leaves the 26th, right? And then the first weekend of May. So Penn State is talking about an official visit with him. Well, Penn State, I believe, graduates on May 8th, 9th weekend. So they're not going to host anybody there. The following weekend, May 18th, is Elite 11 in State College. Well, he doesn't want to go make a visit somewhere and then have to go compete at Elite 11 coming off of a visit. The following weekend is Memorial Day weekend. Nobody's going to be hosting. So when you start looking at it right now, when we're talking just weekends, on his schedule for a lot of them are April 26th, first weekend of May, and then maybe the second weekend of May. And then we're now past Memorial Day. And like you said, you want to get quarterbacks on board early. Rutgers is talking to him about a late May official or even a midweek official because he's only an hour from their campus. West Virginia is trying to get that locked in. and West Virginia's trying to have all these other moving parts on who they want to bring in when, you and I off camera talked about McWhorter and everything. So it really, I found the complexity of Falzone's schedule to be really intriguing and something that I think would be a really good read for people.
I think, yeah, I'm very curious where West Virginia goes with this, whether they try to take more than one, especially now that there's no more quote unquote walk-on quarterbacks, how they handle it all. And honestly, like you say, like kind of want to get him early, but really, as with Rich Rodriguez's offense, you're going to make an impression late, but you can't wait till the fall. So, whew, could be interesting with West Virginia at the quarterback position. Brian, I think that's all the time we got for today. I'm glad we were able to cover everything. I appreciate you coming on such short notice. I think this was a very pleasant palate cleanse for the West Virginia fans who have had to deal with basketball and coaching searches and quite honestly, not a lot of access at spring football. So this was a nice cleanse, and I appreciate you coming on and talking with us.
I appreciate it. I'll say this before I leave, and I hope the West Virginia fan base understands just how good you and Mike are at covering your program, being honest, being objective, and being upfront, and also getting scoop after scoop. So I really hope that they understand and appreciate you guys.
Check your phone and make sure my Venmo payment came through for that. I appreciate that.
All right.
Brian, again, thanks a lot. We'll have you on again soon. And then West Virginia fans, your sports fans, thanks for tuning in. I believe, and I think at the last podcast, I may have lied. Right after Brian just said that we were honest and truthful and all that. I may have lied. That 50% VIP is still ongoing. So hop in while you still can. Get that VIP for 50% off and come check out earsports.com. Till then, I'm Chris Anderson.